Dead by Daylight is an incredibly divisive game, with an equally divided community, but I can't think of a modern topic that's quite so divisive as 2v8, Dead by Daylight's recurring alternate game mode that comes back for 3 weeks every mid-chapter patch. And I mean divisive in the literal sense, because divisive is often used as a euphemism for unpopular or controversial, but no. 2v8 has genuinely divided the community, between a large chunk of people who seem to treat all of DBD outside of these 3 weeks as a waiting room until 2v8 comes back again, and another large chunk who view that waiting period as more like a stay on death row before your queue times get the electric chair. This wouldn't really be a problem if 2v8's frankly obscene half-hour killer queue times were limited to just 2v8 itself. But even if you don't play a single game of 2v8 during the weeks it's up, your queue times will be inflated simply because so many players flock to the mode. It's a mode that has suffered from its own success. And yet despite the mode's clear, rampant popularity, has anybody else noticed an overwhelming air of negativity about the mode that's been building up over the past several iterations? Dead by Daylight players being negative. I know. Weird, isn't it? I think part of this is down to a general pessimism among the DBD community in the past several months. I'm not an idiot. I know why the videos I've been doing lately on positive topics do nowhere near as well as the ones where I'm complaining about something. But 2v8 is a really fascinating topic to talk about because I can't think of an issue where the DVD community feels so cleanly divided. I mean, I'm sure as hell not getting into a 2v8 match anytime soon, and you're probably not either, so we may as well make the best of the extra time, and try to understand why 2v8 has lost its luster for so many players, and why many players are still playing it anyway. Welcome, friends and foes, survivors and killers, to 2v8, and the very simple question, does anybody really care anymore? You might have noticed, by the way, there is no Cassie today. She's going into shed right now, so she's all curled up in her warm, moist enclosure, currently sitting in her water bowl, feeling very miserable until her new layer of skin comes in. Doing this without her isn't going to be easy, but I'm confident I'll be able to handle it on my own. Look at her. She's so sad. She can't see shit. You know what? I'll just leave this in here. She's going to struggle with the words because she can't see very well. But maybe she'll like the pictures. The first thing worth noting about 2v8 is that of DBD's limited time modes and modifiers, it is the only one that has stood the test of time and has continuously come back ever since it was introduced. We haven't had Lights Out in over a year, even though the last innovation into it was in the Castlevania mid-chapter, and was actually pretty good. And Chaos Shuffle, which is my personal favourite modifier, hasn't come back in a while, and it's been getting steadily less regular since last year. Our last one was almost 4 months ago, we don't know when the next one's going to be, and by this time last year in 2025, we'd had 3 Chaos Shuffle events, in January, March and April 2025. And a lot of the events we've been getting this past year haven't had a lot of new gameplay either. The 9th Anniversary, Bone Chill, Haunted by Daylight and Blood Moon events all featured gameplay that was broadly similar or the same as what we'd seen from these events in prior years. This created mixed results. The Blood Pumps had a lot of issues in 2025's Blood Moon that I think were largely solved in the 2026 version, so that was really good. The Blood Moon's probably my favourite event now. But the Twisted Masquerade really showed its age, and I'm looking forward to the theme and identity of the anniversary event changing this year. So, with every other event either being slowly peeled back or going broadly unchanged this year, you might think 2v8 would be getting all that attention. After all, it's their big marquee mode, the one they make unique trailers for, themed skin sales around, and revisit old license holders, cap in hand, asking if we could please have your characters in 2v8, please with a cherry on top. You can tell they figured out how to truly monetize 2v8 in a way they've never explicitly monetized an event before, because every time they've added a new licensed killer to 2v8, they've always come with a skin. RE4 Remake Wesker, Classic RE3 Nemesis, Crow Ghostface, Crostface, Birthday Party Chucky, Pyramid Head but peeled even more than usual, and Dracula who's blue for an amazing reason. Many of their associated survivors have had skins alongside 2v8 as well. Cheryl's Devotee skin and the Richter Belmont legendary, for example. And this combination of skin releases alongside 2v8s has happened for original chapters as well, like the Blood and Bone skin collection that dropped for the first round of 2v8, and the new and returning Attack on Titan content for this 2v8. The recipe to turn 2v8 into a moneymaker mode has been established. Get a big popular character or two into 2v8, give them a big glossy skin at the same time, and throw in a couple of challenges associated with those characters. And you can try and capture those people who just play killer for 2v8. People who would never think to buy the Warhammer Titan Spirit skin or Hunk Legion skin, so they can try them out in 2v8. Might find the killer to be more fun with a friend, or just when matchmaking's turned off, and buy a skin so they can show off their new outfit to their duo buddy. And that idea becomes way more compelling when that killer skin is brand new and splat all over the marketing for an event. And I can say this because I am part of that problem. I enjoy 2v8 Trapper in a way that I really don't particularly love him in 1v4. His big weakness of a glacially slow early game in 1v4 for a pretty dubious payoff makes him very underwhelming against even somewhat decent survivors. Paying attention to the killer in the corner, this isn't about her. But in 2v8, Trapper has a whole new lease of life. Your weak early game is mitigated by having a second killer cover for you while you're doing grunt work setting up traps, breaking pallets and kicking gens so they can focus on chasing. And Trapper endgames are unlike anything else in 2v8. A few bear traps on tonics, exit gates, cage spots, etc. can be paired with a mobile teammate like Blight or Wraith to turn the late game into a whack-a-mole competition when you have control of the gates, because Trapper's take on area control genuinely changes the way the game is played. So I spent 15 quid on the Naughty Bear skin, on a killer I just don't really play in 1v4 DVD. And despite the high price of the skin, I feel good about that purchase because every 2v8 I dust off God's naughtiest bear and I get to have fun on my naughty adventures with a friend, running around the trail like a teddy bear while they dash around slopping all over the place, and my duo partner always lets me get the Mori because Naughty Bear's Mori is really cool and people like to see it. Look, I'm somebody who very rarely spends money on skins in any game, let alone DBD. I'm pretty frugal with my money, cost of living crisis and all that, you know. I have a chud baby creature that I need to keep in rats and substrate, and Magic and Warhammer are not exactly cheap hobbies to maintain, so that's where my disposable income tends to go. Besides, I've been playing for ages, and most of the characters that I play are originals anyway, so usually I have a shitload of Eerie shards to get the skins I want for characters eventually with a little bit of patience. Although right now I'm sitting on my Eerie shards because I have 9 licensed perks to buy when they hit the shrine. I don't even have any attachment to Naughty Bear as an IP. And yet, I am not immune to 2v8 propaganda, or funny bears with human teeth. And if it could work on me, it would sure as hell work on players who actually love Castlevania or Attack on Titan, and relish the chance to play with skins for their favourite characters alongside their friends in ways they couldn't before. Obviously, without the sales figures, we can't know this for sure, but I'd assume this model's working out pretty well. They did it for Attack on Titan after all. So, why has the 2v8 new release model slowed down so much? We've not seen any new killers released in this 2v8, we only got one in the last one, and that means very few new skins for the 2v8 playable killers. I mean, the marquee skin for this new 2v8 is the Trapper skin for Eren Yeager's Titan, which is a port from the old DBD Mobile collab, and a pretty disappointing one at that. And to be honest, that was a skin we were probably going to get anyway, even if there wasn't a 2v8 alongside it. So, why has 2v8 development and expansion stalled? I have a theory. I think something has gotten behaviour scared of just adding more stuff to 2v8, and that's caused development time on 2v8 to mostly freeze while they prioritise 1v4. And as to what they're scared of, I think I need only say a single word. Legion. Legion is the only killer behaviour has ever removed from 2v8 for creating a bad gameplay experience for survivors. And that bit I made in my Legion video a little while ago immediately aged like milk as soon as that was announced. 2v8 Legion works in a very similar way to current Legion, but they have a longer frenzy duration and get a maximum of 8 stabs for their down rather than 4, and this makes them surprisingly well suited to 2v8 support killer role that no other killer except maybe Trapper can occupy. Working with another killer allows Legion's strengths of forcing survivors to scatter and spreading injuries to be capitalised on by another killer who cleans up after them. The larger survivor team and AoE team skills make survivors grouping up inevitable, something that Legion can counter. Once they get a few stabs in, they end up moving fast enough to travel across 2v8's gigantic maps, and if your teammate cages someone and they get uncaged while you're still in your frenzy, that's basically 2 free stabs to add to your chain, one for the person on the hook and one for the person who unhooks them. So many people felt that 2v8 Legion was far more fun than 1v4 Legion could ever be. Maybe this is where the killer can find their niche beyond just being, Plague without a soul. Yeah, it turns out those strengths in that mode I pointed out in my video might have worked out a little bit too well. Legion's power heavily punishes grouping up, which happens inherently in a mode with so many players, and the ability to get a completely free first hit means that a second killer who can get a very quick additional hit through an overwhelming chase power or stealth created a ton of completely insufferable combos with Legion. Not to mention the nightmare that being perpetually injured creates in a trial with an Oni. So after a couple of rounds of 2v8 spent trying to make the killer feel fair, Behaviour axed Legion from the mode in the newest 2v8, with seemingly no intention of bringing them back in the future. This was discussed in the most recent community livestream.
Legion right now is going to still show as not active or kill switched. For a future 2v8, it will show properly as not available in this mode, and so we want to make it very clear. We tried quite a few things to get Legion to work in 2v8 internally. Ultimately, there was not a way we could find it to be fun without modifying the power in a drastic way. And that's something we always want to avoid. We want to avoid changing it from a power that you recognize if you are used to this killer in 1v4. So what we try to do when picking killers that we want to add into 2v8, we want to ensure that they are simple to understand, they are fun for both roles, and there's a strong usage and appreciation for them in 1v4.
With this framework in mind, it is much easier to see why the release of new killers has slowed down in the past couple of 2v8s. Despite the original vision of the devs being that they get everyone into 2v8 that they possibly can and then make it permanent, the conditions to actually get a killer into the mode today are surprisingly prohibitive. They want to add killers that are widely popular to play, generally considered fun to play against, have intuitive powers that are easy for new or hyper-casual players to pick up, have a power design that doesn't create major issues unique to 2v8 like Legion's does, and while licensed characters are obviously at a premium because, brand recognition is king here, they have to renegotiate with the license holders to get these characters because the original negotiations weren't done with 2v8 in mind. Since the IP holder's character could potentially appear alongside other licensed killers that could potentially create some legal complications. With that in mind, that leaves the pool of killers that could belong in 2v8 as surprisingly small, and really just made up of the killers who were already in it. And short of making new deals with old license holders, I think Behaviour is happy to leave the killer roster in 2v8 more or less where it is for now. The mode already has a shitload of players, so maybe they don't want to rock the boat too much. And with 1v4 having some issues right now, I could see resources that were devoted to maintaining 2v8 getting redirected into the main game instead. I mean, well, that's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario, well... If this is their plan, to leave 2v8 in an acceptable but unexciting state while the manpower is used to put out the many, many fires of the standard 1v4 game mode, then I can't blame them. Any time spent improving the 1v4 mode will inherently be better spent than that amount of time spent on 2v8 improvement, because 1v4 is the main mode of the game that we play day in, day out. But this approach has a shelf life. It won't last forever. 2v8 is already getting kind of stagnant, as smaller and smaller changes get made each time, and the longer resources are funneled away from its development, the worse this is going to get. And what worries me here the most is that the devs might wind up letting 2v8 rot for longer than they should, because even if folks might not like the state 2v8 is in, if they find it boring or stale, it doesn't matter, because the game all but shoves you into playing the mode anyway during the 3 weeks it's active. The queue time issue is so severe that Behaviour has created a carrot and stick approach that encourages playing 2v8 instead of 1v4, even if you don't really care about 2v8. Obviously, if you want to play killer with a friend, then you don't need a carrot, the mode is just perfect for you. But to attract survivor players, 2v8 has been giving out absolutely outrageous blood point incentives, the likes of which we were only seeing in the Blood Moon event. 1v4 Survivor does not have this bonus. At time of recording, the 2v8 serve bonus is at 3.5 times, but the 1v4 bonus is just 1.25 times. And 2v8 matches are over faster, and the average BP gain is higher, because you're far more likely to escape a mode as rampantly Survivor-sided as 2v8. Unless you're part of a full team stacking streamers or other group BP offerings, it just makes more economic sense from a blood point perspective to play 2v8 instead of 1v4, and on one hand that is fine if the goal is to decrease queue times for killer in 2v8, but on the other hand it means that if the devs are judging 2v8's popularity by how many players are playing each mode, 2v8 just gives better rewards regardless of how stale the gameplay in the mode actually is. So a lot of people will gravitate towards it regardless. That's to say nothing of the ways in which 2v8 punishes players who don't want to engage with it during the weeks it's up with outright hideous queue times. while the enormous BP bonuses entice Survivor players away from 1v4 queues. Play While You Wait has improved this a bit, but even 2v8's Play While You Wait is almost inarguably a better experience than 1v4. In 2v8 you're often queuing with a friend, loading into two 2v8 Survivor matches which are probably going to be the easiest DBD games you'll ever play, and you'll get a million blood points for doing it until you get into your killer match. Meanwhile, in 1v4 Play While You Wait, you're playing in solo queue, widely considered the most miserable thing in Dead by Daylight. You are doing it without the massive incentives 2v8 provides, and the only reason you have to do this is because somebody else is playing the new mode and you would rather not. The end result here is if you don't like the 2v8 experience, 1v4 is just not as fun during the period 2v8 is active. So if you don't like the killers on offer, or the lack of build options, or how incredibly Survivor-sided the mode is, you are not in any way encouraged to play 1v4 instead. You're encouraged to play Tomodachi Life or Overwatch for a few weeks until queues return to normal. It is the prisoner's dilemma. If everybody picked 1v4, everyone will get their matches quickly. If everybody picked 2v8, everyone will get their matches quickly. But if some people pick 1v4 and some pick 2v8, the 1v4 players are just playing a worse version of regular DBD, while 2v8 players are swimming in blood points, challenge progress, and easy escapes, even if they have to wait longer for it. This means that if the developers are trying to gauge 2v8's health by its popularity, we have a problem on our hands, because even if a player doesn't particularly care for 2v8, they're still pushed to play it over the main mode by a vast pile of blood points on one hand, and irritating queue times that just make you want to wait a few weeks on the other. Thus the carrot and the stick. That keeps pretty much the entire community playing the mode, even if many of them don't really care for it. Honestly, it just sounds like I'm whining about 2v8 now, and that's really not my intention, at least not entirely. I see the value in this mode and how it electrifies the players who really love it, the people who come back to DBD every few months just to give it a go. I want you lot to have the best experience you can with a game mode that continues to feel fresh and interesting, and gives you reasons to keep coming back beyond the novelty of playing killer with a buddy. And I want to love it too. But we're not going to get there if nothing changes. So where do we go from here? The way I see it, there are 4 ways forward for 2v8's future. Go wide, go deep, go big, or go home. So when I say 2v8 could go wide, I mean you expand the roster of killers with more inclusions. Most 2v8s since the first have added 2 killers, but that has varied over time. Resident Evil added 3 back in the 3rd version, Chucky came on his own in version 7, and we've had 2 2v8s with no killers at all, version 5 and the current version 8. I'm going to be 100 emoji with you, unless it contains major rework and stuff like, classes or whatever. A 2v8 without a new killer, or even 1 new killer, just doesn't quite feel worth the damage it does to the queues. 2 killers feels perfect, because now you can have both killers in your duo trying out the new hotness together. And I know that if you want killers who fulfill behaviour's laundry list of requirements of easy killers that people love to play and can at least tolerate playing against, whose core power fundamentals don't grind against the way 2v8 works, could be buffed reasonably easy to make them useful in the mode, and who ideally don't have license holders who are too hard to please, I won't mince my words, that is a pretty tight set of restrictions. But the term popular, I think, can be a bit malleable when it comes to 2v8, because, well, 2v8 can give unpopular characters a new lease of life. Trapper, I think, showcases that pretty well. I've talked about that already, how I started playing Trapper in 2v8 and have enjoyed playing him in a way that you just can't really do in 1v4. He adds a new way to play the game mode that elevates both him and 2v8 as a whole. Who's to say other killers can't do something similar? Of course it would require adding powers that do things other than dash and fire a mid-range zoning beam, and then dash a 3rd time because, well, everyone's got a 3rd dash in 2v8. When I think of original killers who could fit nicely into 2v8 and add an extra dimension to it, play like nothing we've seen in 2v8 before, and could be appreciated inclusions unlikely to cause too many issues, Artist, Houndmaster, and Unknown are the big 3. Artist is a long-range information killer who belong very nicely on 2v8's gigantic maps. She'd be able to guide her teammate around using her swarms, and would be able to use the mode's plentiful aura reading to full effect to nail ridiculous long-range hits. You might need to remove lockers being able to dissipate a crow swarm given how many lockers Huntress puts on these maps, but I think she'd be a wonderful inclusion. Imagine using info from your crows to guide a Billy or a Blight across the map, or down someone stuck in a trapper trap through 4 solid walls because they're too busy trying to escape the trap to dispel the crow swarm in time. Unknown is the people's princess among original killers. Honestly, if there is any original killer I straight up do not understand not being in 2v8 yet, it's him. Getting Unknown working effectively in 2v8 would be a guaranteed crowd pleaser, and he'd fill a unique niche among ranged killers in the mode. Huntress and Deathslinger are slow as molasses, and struggle to navigate 2v8's national park-sized maps. Unknown's hallucination mechanic lets him get where he needs to go to get people all goopy. And B115 is nice here as well. We could see buffs like UVX blast radius, hallucination count, teleport cooldown and hallucination deployment time, to help Unknown wrangle bigger groups of survivors and be an all-purpose teammate that basically any killer could relish having. Houndmaster might sound like a wild card here, but after the year of regular bug fixes she's received, she honestly works alright now, and I'd say she's shipshape for 2v8. No pun intended. She's an extremely versatile killer with a bit of map traversal, a bit of long-range tracking, and quite a lot of lethality. And the only real issue I'm seeing here is the sheer abundance of pallets making Snug awkward to use. But a good solution to that problem would be a relatively simple buff. Every time you stand Snug with a pallet, it breaks. To give Portia a sense of progress, actually choose through 2v8's abundant resources. Snug holding a survivor still so that Slinger or Huntress can line up a shot, or dragging someone into a trapper trap, sounds like a dream come true. But if you polished up the search mode trail to speed up the other killer as well, the possibilities become really exciting. Imagine Snug running up to your gen, and you think Portia's coming to follow up, but no. It's a nemesis who's running along that trail, barreling up towards you at 1,000,000 miles an hour, like you're playing Resident Evil 3's Inferno mode. These three are all sort of dark horses. Killers people tend not to adore, but I think maybe want to like. Killers that could fit right at home into 2v8, and there's a bunch of other killers who I think have potential to suit it well if handled properly. Clown isn't exactly anybody's favourite killer, but he'd be a cool teammate to have. You're chasing a survivor at a stupid strong loop, and your teammate lobs a yellow bottle into your tile to give you a speed boost and help you get the hit. Seems cool enough to me. Twins seem like a scary prospect for 2v8 on paper, but honestly I think they'd be way more manageable for a bunch of uncoordinated solo Q-Andes than they are in 1v4. Every survivor in this mode has a base kit self-pickup. Healing speeds are insane with the medic class, Twins don't have access to anti-healing perks to push back on that, and Twins are already countered by playing grouped up, something that 2v8 inherently creates due to the lobby size. The same reason that Legion wasn't okay in 2v8 is probably the same reason Twins would be, and could do with some pretty chunky buffs to keep them useful. Maybe increase Victor's Shriek detection range, crank up his movement speed, reduce his regrow cooldown, and the amount of time survivors can hold him hostage for, and I can imagine Twins being a really valuable support killer. Following up on your teammate killer by getting downs when they hit and run, scouting and detecting, dropping Victor on teammates to break up a reset or stop them doing a critical generator in time. Turning 2v8 into a 3v8 seems fun if you could handle the bug apocalypse that would likely ensue from doing literally anything with the Twins, but if we're not worried about bugs, then fuck it. Why not a 5v8? Knight being able to have multiple guards out at once would be a hell of a 2v8 buff, and would add another area control killer able to wrangle groups of players. Hell, if Trapper gets to be an old dog, taught some new tricks as a setup killer in a mode where setup killers get really interesting, what's stopping Hag from doing exactly the same thing? Maybe you could save Merchant till the rework though. I don't think many people will be happy with a killer with half a power as their teammate. But going wide has its limits. There are lots of killers who would cause more legitimate issues, whether that would be because of licensing nightmares or technical challenges or just gameplay issues that would bubble up to the surface in a 2v8 environment. Plague is the perfect example. If you think Legion's ability to keep you injured was bad, try a full infection keeping you broken for the entire match because Trapper has put bear traps on all the cleansing fountains. Honestly, any of the killers with stations or other trial objects the survivors must interact with, like Xenomorph, Pig, Sadako, Singularity, or either of the Vecnas, could create serious issues. In part because you'll have to balance them around a second killer trapping or patrolling them, and in part because map spawns would have to be tweaked to accommodate not just these stations spawning in the right places in these weird big 2v8 maps, but also to make sure that two sets of these stations can spawn at once, to take into account two killers with station powers coexisting in the same trial. For example, Xenomorph turrets, Sadako TVs and Springtrap doors are all meant to spawn near gens, so if, say, Xeno and Sadako are both in the same trial, which one gets priority? How many tunnels or tapes or doors or Henry clocks does the map need now? Do we need to paint 8, 9 and 10 on Springtrap's doors now that there's 10 gens rather than 7, and adjust his entire door UI on both sides to reflect that? Honestly, that's not even the worst of Springtrap's problems in 2v8. There is no way you could make other killers travelling through the doors work properly, given how Springtrap's UI interacts with the door system. Not to mention what would happen if a non-Springtrap killer found someone in the security office, and the only answer here is that the other killer doesn't get to use Springtrap's doors, which would turn them into impenetrable safe havens for survivors who could run to them as soon as the other killer threatens to chase them off their gen. That would be a simply agonising experience to play with, watching the survivor you're chasing disappear into a door and then sit there on the camera waiting for you to leave. And it's kind of not really solvable without reworking Springtrap's entire door system. If I had a Springtrap in my lobby, I'd either be bear trapping every security door on the map, or just dodging that lobby, because I would rather wait another half hour in queue than deal with that bullshit. I'm not going to go through every single killer here. I made this tier list to give my overall thoughts on each killer's potential in 2v8 if current popularity is excluded from behaviour's priorities, but I hope you see my point. 2v8 could be expanded with more killers. If behaviour wanted to, they could 100% add some more killers, even without having to renegotiate licenses. It might involve adding some killers who aren't, the big superstars that behaviour loves so much, but at least to me that seems preferable to not adding any at all and letting the mode stagnate. But even if going wide is the future and behaviour does want to add these more niche or diverse killers, all it's doing is delaying that point of stagnation, because not every killer can be added, whether it's for design reasons or legal reasons. The gallery of 2v8 killers will always be incomplete, and if 2v8 sticks around in the long term, stagnation will become a problem eventually. So what happens when going wide reaches its limit? What happens if we're already at that limit? If we can't go any wider, and the next step is to go deeper. By going deeper, I mean continuing to innovate not on the killer roster, but on the class system, to give both survivors and killers more options to play with, more depth, if you like. Yep, everybody get out your copy of Das Kapital, because we're discussing the class system. Right now, 2v8 has 4 killer classes: Brute, Enforcer, Fearmonger, and Shadow, and 5 survivor classes: Escapist, Guide, Medic, Scout, and the new class Torchbearer. Much of 2v8's early iterations were spent reworking and tinkering with the class system, replacing killer team skills with the 4 killer classes in the second round of 2v8, and consistently tinkering with the survivor classes, with the most attention given to Guide and Escapist. There are tons of options for more survivor classes to diversify survivor gameplay. Lightbringer was a great start, but I'm confident that we could have way more. We don't have a Plunderer archetype, for example. The 2v8 maps have 1 million chests on them, but no class specialises in, items. Imagine being able to refuel or upgrade people's items, or get other bonuses from opening, rummaging, or even reclosing open chests. There's already plenty of room to add a class who plays around with boons, too. The 2v8 trials are full of hex totems that currently do nothing other than get you some BP. Why not change that? You could even separate the sprint, bursty, and quick and quiety elements of Escapist into 2 different classes, one dedicated to actually chasing and one being stealthy, maybe giving your teammates access to stealth as well. Given how they're clearly trying really, really hard to push survivors into the mode, I'm very surprised that more time isn't being poured into making more survivor classes. They've improved the ones they have, but this current 2v8 contain no changes to any of the survivor classes at all. Are they just happy with the classes as they are? If so, why not make more of them, and give servers more ways to play the mode they're trying really hard to attract survivors to? Innovating for killer classes is a little bit harder though, because the way killers can interact with their environment without involving their power is a bit more limited. It's why all the killer classes just give you status effects or stat bonuses upon taking normal game actions. This means that you can sometimes just forget your class or your teammate's class, because it's just a stat boost. But this wasn't always the case. Killers in the first round of 2v8 had what we called team skills instead, which was a modification to their power allowing them to fill a role on a team to help out their second killer. Hillbilly, for example, could not instantly down survivors with his chainsaw, but driving by a survivor with the saw exposed them, so you could zoom past an ongoing chase and give your teammate an insta-down, or Wraith going into Cloak would give his teammate undetectable if he was nearby. This was a really cool idea, but created some frustration among killer players for feeling pigeonholed into a playstyle. Mostly I think it was just Billy players mad they couldn't insta-down anymore. The outcome of this was the removal of team skills in favour of the class system, but now that the design space of generic classes has largely been filled already, I think it's high time we see team skills return. Not to replace the classes, but as an optional 5th alternative class that each killer can pick if they want to. Say you're playing Hillbilly, and you load into a lobby with a Death Slinger. You might want to give the old man exposed on his harpoon shots, so you can put on your team skill class, let's call it a unique class for clarity's sakes, and you have the option now to use your power to enable your teammate. And if you don't want to do that, and would rather keep your insta down, you can just put on one of the 4 default classes and you'll be fine. For the 5 killers who were around when the team skill system was a thing, you could just bring their team skills back as the 5th optional unique class. And while it would require designing new team skills for every killer, they've added 2v8 since the original 5, if the goal of 2v8 going forwards involves keeping the roster of killers small and adding new ones less frequently than we used to, it would be a good idea to keep killer gameplay fresh and let people try out fun new combinations without adding more killers. Hell, the smaller the killer roster available in 2v8 is, the easier it is to make unique classes for each of them now, and then you just got to make sure that you come up with one for each new killer you add later. Scrolling on the screen now, you can see I've actually come up with ideas myself for a unique class option for each killer currently in 2v8 that I think would be cool as an optional alternative to the 4 generic classes. Tell me what you think in the comments and what team skill you'd want for your favourite killer in 2v8. At some point, Behaviour will innovate on 2v8's gameplay loop or customization options by adding more killers more quickly, supplementing the class system, or both. That might be out of choice because they want to give more options to players, or maybe they will be forced to when the mode stagnates enough and interest in 2v8 gets low enough that it's hard to justify the damage it does to queues anymore. Let's be honest, queues really are the spectre that looms over 2v8. If you don't like the mode, you can just ignore it and play 1v4. But that means for 3 weeks every quarter, your game experience is just much worse than it was before for no good reason, and there's nothing we can do about it. But what if we could? Part of the reason 2v8 fucks the queue so badly is because the event is limited time. Players get FOMO for the 3 weeks it's out every mid-chapter patch, and rush to cram in their 2v8 games while the mode is still around. But if the mode becomes permanent, that in theory stops being a problem. Maybe Behaviour's problem with handling 2v8 is just they're not thinking big enough. Every time 2v8 comes round, the queue times are ridiculous, and basically every change made to 2v8 since its inception has been done to try to address this. The crazy BP bonuses, play while you wait, the insanely survivor-sided approach to balancing. It has all been done to help the mode attract survivor players who are needed to balance out the mode. But is it just me, or do these queues start to get better towards the end of the mode? After a couple of weeks, the novelty's worn off to some extent. People have gotten in all the games they can with their killer duo buddy and want to go back to the 1v4 mode where they have, their perks, their favourite killers, a decent chance of stopping all the gens being done. There is no reason this wouldn't happen should the mode become permanent. Some players would move over to the game mode full time, but many would go back to 1v4 being their main way of playing the game, especially if 1v4 then starts to get all the shiny new releases and perks and stuff that 2v8 can never have. The problem here is that while there's no reason the queue times wouldn't normalise after a while, there is also no guarantee that they would. And even if they did, there's no knowing how long this process would take, how long we'd be left in queue time hell of our own making. And if this was to somehow go wrong, if queue time sucked for the long term, or they were forced to take down 2v8 completely after promising to make it permanent, it would shatter consumer confidence in Behaviour. And there's not a huge amount of that going spare these days. So let's talk about the worst case scenario for 2v8's future. Let's assume everything I've said so far can't happen or that it's been tried and failed. The killer roster and the classes stay broadly the way they are long term. The mode can't go permanent, so it keeps fucking with the queue times because of the FOMO. What happens if the mode basically stays the way it is? If what we have now is all we're ever going to get? If that's the case, I think it might be time to have less 2v8 in our lives, maybe make it 2 weeks every go round rather than 3, maybe have it less often, and Behaviour's dev time and attention can be dedicated to new game modes to replace it. Hopefully modes that don't cause the enormous queue time divides that 2v8 does. I hope it never comes to this, but if 2v8 isn't going to improve, if it can't improve, it might be time to take our ball and go home. I like to remind everyone that aside from seasonal events, 2v8 is the only alternate game mode that we get these days. We've not had a new one for well over a year, and Chaos Shuffle and Lights Out have all but been phased out. We desperately need more rotating game mode options to keep things fresh between events and releases, and decoupling ourselves from 2v8 would let us experiment with new modes without completely mutilating the queues. I remember a 5v5 mode being drafted up. 4 survivors, 1 killer, all working together against another team of 4 survivors and 1 killer. That'd be another 10-man game mode, but it would be far less likely to cause the massive killer-survivor disparity that has defined 2v8 since its inception. Maybe we get a 1v1 mode, or prop hunt, or capture the flag, or blight racing, or Nintendo Snugs, or something, anything, to break up half-hour queues and sprint burst on the F key, and Huntress Blight duos and Giant Larrys and... I'm just so sick, man. I am sick of it all. And if 2v8 needs a big licensed crossover every single time you run it back, and that's why you can't actually innovate on the mode's roster or gameplay, maybe it's not worth keeping around as much, and we can move our attention on to new ideas. So in conclusion, what do I think of 2v8? I think it's too much of a good thing. The monkey's paw curling into a middle finger that doesn't really live up to the hype anymore. It's a simplified version of regular DBD, with a third of the playable killers, which would be fine if it didn't actively make the game worse for a few weeks every time it rolled around. And I'm okay with 2v8 being deprioritized for a while because 1v4 is an alright fucking state, and that should be the priority. But it becomes much harder to enjoy 1v4, even if it does improve, when your queues go from 30 seconds to 10 minutes because somebody else wants to play Nemesis with their little brother. I dread 2v8 coming back around every few months because the novelty of playing Trapper with a friend for 3 games in 2 hours just is not worth it anymore unless I have literally nothing better to do. Not to mention how bad it feels to wait 10 minutes for a killer game in 1v4 and then have the first survivor you chase immediately disconnect for no reason at all. I was trying to get cross-view footage the other day for a video I was working on. It took me 30 minutes to get a usable game. I waited 10 minutes, finally got a match, and everybody just gave up and refused to play the game, so I couldn't use the footage. Then I queue up for 10 more minutes, and the server breaks. And then I queue up for 10 more minutes, and I finally get my match. I have to play on RPD. Fucking... what the hell am I supposed to do? I don't know how popular this opinion is, but I'm confident it's not an opinion that's getting less popular over time. And without major overhauls to 2v8, I think we're going to be seeing more and more people asking that same question. A question that I've been asking myself more and more with each runback of the mode. Why should I care about 2v8 anymore?